Hello and welcome to the 14th episode of The Pitcher or the Hitter. I'm Sahil Shah, and I'm joined today with special guest Erik McKean, our commissioner and owner of the Stanton Stranglers. Thanks for coming on, Erik.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. First, before we start off, obviously Cam is not here co-hosting this week. As many of you know, he has the coronavirus. So our best wishes to Cam, but I trust that Erik will be able to fill in well. So, so we have a fun episode planned for you. Let's start out by first congratulating Erik and I for making the league's 300th trade. And in fitting fashion, it wasn't really a big one. I traded Daniel and Alex's 2025 third-round pick to Erik for Connor's 2021 third-round pick.
Yay.
Yeah. Hey, any big thoughts on that trade, Erik?
Yeah, I mean, no one wants 2021 picks anymore, so I just thought I'd trade that one to you. It'd be fitting that us two make the 300th trade.
Yep, and I would love to acquire more 2021 picks. So if anyone would like to give them to me, let's do it. So just a couple stats I wanted to run by here. I've posted some of these in the chat, but we've made 75 trades this offseason. We made 75 trades in all of 2019. And let's keep in mind, the offseason is nowhere close to being finished. If you take Erik and I out of this league and take all of the trades we've made out of this league, we would have only made 120. And if you would include EBO in that, this league would have only made 67 trades. So I think a huge congratulations is not just in order for the 300th trade, but also to our three teams for driving all this trade activity. But we'll get back to the trades here in a second. But first, I wanted to talk about the moves that the Padres just made. They just traded for Yu Darvish. They just traded for Blake Snell. A lot of prospects just got sent Tampa and Chicago's way. And they also made an interesting signing with Hae-Sung Kim. So let's start with the two aces here, Darvish and Snell. How do you think their Dynasty League value is going to be affected by these moves?
Yeah, Darvish, I don't really see much change. I think he's still one of the top pitchers. I don't have any reason to believe he'll be any worse or better because of this. But Snell, maybe he'll pitch deeper into games and he could get a lot of quality starts, and that would help him out a lot for his value.
Yeah, I agree with both of those points. I think Snell, like you said, will pitch deeper into ball games. I think he'll be a little happier there. I got the sense that he would have been a little discontent if he would have stayed in Tampa after the way things had gone. I think he felt like he kind of maxed his potential there. I think Darvish gets a slight upgrade just because I like the infield defense in San Diego, and I think bigger ballpark can only help. And just being on a winning team, that atmosphere. So I definitely agree with those points. It'll be interesting to see with EBO. I know that they like Snell because, he could give you 5 consistent innings and they weren't really looking for the quality starts. And I wonder that if they use this as an opportunity now to potentially sell him a bit higher than they could have before, and then maybe finding another starter to plug in for their 1 to 2 starts that, they really want each week to go with their reliever strategy. So I know Zane already was selling him, but any thoughts there?
Yeah, I have to agree. I checked in on the price, and that's actually what the top offer was, and it was a big one. So I think they sell him.
Yeah, no, knowing Zane, he's all about those big baller moves. So wouldn't be surprised to see that happen. But let's talk now about the catchers that were dealt or might be affected. I know Yuki has been shopping Austin Nola lately, and at different times I've thought that an Austin Nola deal just might happen, but he hasn't closed one yet. How do you think his value gets affected? Because obviously the Cubs acquired Caratini, who I expect to continue to be the personal catcher for Yu Darvish. But I think Caratini has more upside than just someone who's going to play, once a week. How do you see this, kind of shaping out?
Yeah, I mean, Caratini had a pretty decent year last year. He had 11 homers, 348 OBP, came a little bit back down to earth this year, but I don't know. I think I just expect him to catch on only the days that Yu Darvish catches, but this probably affects Campusano because he probably won't have that much time anyway, but he'll probably start in Double A or Triple A anyway, and Nola should get most of the time behind the plate.
Yeah, and wasn't didn't Campusano have some legal issues? I haven't heard any news about
Yeah, I
that
haven't
lately.
heard anything since the arrest, so not sure what's going on there.
I agree. I think Campusano is probably going to start in the minors. I wonder though if this opens up Austin Nola to play at more positions besides just catching. Gives the Padres a little more flexibility if they feel like they trust Caratini to do a bit more. As of right now, Nola is only going to go into the season with catcher eligibility, but if he is able to pick up eligibility somewhere else, first base, second base, third base, even the outfield, I think that would make him an immense, or maybe not immense, but I think it'd make him a solid asset for Yuki and kind of an interesting guy that people can plug and play on their bench. So
Yeah, for sure. Caratini's he's only 27, and maybe if they think he can get some of that 2019 form back, then yeah.
yeah, no, absolutely. But Haesung Kim also signed with the Padres in between the two trades happening. What do you think is going to happen there? Obviously, I think a lot of thoughts that people had was, oh, Cronenworth's going to move to the outfield, but I know the Padres announced that that's not the plan. Obviously, Kim is not displacing Tatis at short or Machado at third, although I did hear one article speculate that, the Padres have talked about Tatis to the outfield in the past. Maybe he plays there. What effect do you think that this has on Cronenworth's value? And do you think, and where do you think that Kim's going to go in the draft? Does this change your opinion of where you think he lands or how high he goes in your opinion?
Yeah, for Cronenworth, I mean, his value definitely takes a hit because he's not guaranteed to play every day. But I feel like he's still going to play most days, kind of be like more of a utility man. Like I feel like he can play anywhere pretty much. He can give the regulars some time off every once in a while. Although I don't know how many starts he's going to get a week, maybe four. But as for Kim, I mean, I've seen a lot of rankings as for like the first year player draft. He's been as high as 2 on some of the rankings and as low as like I don't know, 10 or 12. So that's really interesting to see where he's going to end up.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think Cronenworth's value definitely takes some sort of hit. But I also think that the Padres are trying to build this kind of Dodgers like model here where they're building a very flexible roster and they just want to accumulate all these good pieces. And then they're just going to figure out what they're going to do with it. So I'm confident that Cronenworth will get a lot of playing time still. And we also don't know how Kim is going to adjust necessarily. So I'm not that concerned about Cronenworth. I think his value takes a hit, but the playing time will be there if he plays well. I maybe would have liked to see Kim go somewhere with a bit of a more defined role, but I still think San Diego is a very solid landing spot for him. And I mean, I agree with your analysis of the draft there. I think one thought that I had was that Yuki has a history of drafting players who come from foreign leagues and just go straight to the majors. He drafted Shogo Akiyama last year. He just traded away Willie Castro, which was one of the few shortstop eligible players he had. He's traded away DJ LeMahieu this offseason. And I think he could use some major league ready talent in that infield. I wonder if the guy who Yuki takes that. I want to say Yuki has I'll pull it up here. He has
The
the fifth overall
fourth
pick.
pick.
I
Oh, I
giving
count her as a fourth pick. Never mind.
yeah, no. But given Kim's age if someone believes he could be an asset for the next few years, I mean, I could see Yuki taking him at 5. That would be my early guess. Past that, I don't know if I see you or Zane taking him. You know what? I changed my mind. I think I could see you taking him. I don't know where he is on your draft board. I'm not going to out you, but I
uh,
could
I'm,
see.
yeah, I'm thinking about it. I'm probably not going to finalize my board till like the week before the draft, but he is very interesting. I could definitely see Yuki taking him because Shoko Akiyama and Yoshitomo Tsuga were both taken in the first round last year.
Yep,
And Kim had a way better walk to strikeout ratio than those two guys and has more power speed upside, I'd say.
and is younger. Like
Yeah, for sure.
I could also see EBO taking a chance on him. I know they have some older position players. They're looking to get young. And like I mentioned earlier, Zane never shies away from the big baller move. And
Sure.
even Clayton and Jake. But I mean, it's just, I think 5 is the first place I see him going. And I could see him going anywhere between 5 and like 14 where your pick is. And I think if he's still on the board at 15 where Andrew's at, I think Andrew would jump all over him.
Yeah, I think he goes in the first round, but we'll see. I think this is like the big storyline of the draft.
Yeah, because I think that's really going to help some of these other pieces fall into place. And I mean, as we saw last year, once Sasuga went 4th and Shogo Akiyama went 6th. I mean, right there at the 7th slot, Bobby Wood Jr. fell. You were able to get Jason Dominguez at 10. The top drafted pitcher in the MLB draft won 8th in this draft, Lodolo. Riley Green fell. So I think that this could open up some values late, and I'm really interested to see how this plays out. The last player I wanted to talk about was Luis Patino. Connor, I believe, owns him. Do you think the move to Tampa affects his value? I mean, personally, for me, on one hand, Tampa's like a pitching factory, and I think that they can really help him. But at the other hand, it's not like San Diego's a bad place to be for pitcher development. And there's not Patino's innings are inevitably, I think, going to be limited a bit a la Blake Snell. So what do you think there?
Yeah, I think his value can only go up from here because he's a top 10 prospect on Fangraphs. He did struggle a bit this year in the majors, but he was also like only pitched 17 innings, all of them in relief. And I feel like unless he like shot out of the gate, he wasn't really going to get a chance to start with a stacked rotation. And he definitely could pitch in the Rays rotation this year if they'll let him.
Yeah, do you I mean, I agree. I mean, what the Rays besides Glass now, I mean, it's like Ryan Yarbrough and Michael Waka, Yanni Trinos is hurt. So I mean, it's just like I don't think other than like Glass now, I don't see any of these other guys as like absolute locks to the point where like Patino couldn't knock them out of the rotation if they're not doing so hot. But it'll be interesting to see how Tampa uses him moving forward in Dynasty. I think I've become more leery of these Tampa pitchers in Dynasty leagues because I know the production is going to be there, but just the unorthodox usage, given the way, our scoring format is set up, just doesn't appeal to me as much. Like you said, he's a top 10 prospect, like the pedigree's there. I think has a chance to become a really good arm, but I just think as long as he's in Tampa, I wonder if the upside will be a little bit limited just by them just having this blanket. We're not going to let you pitch the third time through the order. But let's transition here to the trades that were made in the league since we last shot the podcast, or shot our last podcast. 3 deals have been made, all minor. We already talked about the Picks deal. I already mentioned Willie Castro for Jackson Kowar, but did you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think it's decent trade for both sides. I'm not particularly high on. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, Jackson Kowar could definitely turn into a solid piece, and so could Willie Castro. So I think it's a fair deal.
I agree. I don't really think there's much more to add there. Admittedly, it's just a minor deal, but shout out to Yuki and Anthony for making their first trade with each other.
Let's go. Just need Anthony and Kyron to make one.
Yeah, I mean, 3 years in the league, you would think these two would have come together for at least one deal, but evidently not. I think they're both just kind of like wait for deals to come to them as opposed to like really being aggressive and offering deals themselves. And I think that combination just hasn't worked. But fingers crossed that before the offseason ends, they reach a deal. Let's talk about this other deal. This was a little more interesting to me. Moneyball traded Ty France, William Contreras, Jackson Rutledge to Ruth Vick and Nick for Diego Castillo, Adrian Morejon, and Ronaldo Hernandez. Personally, I think that Ty France is a bit of a deep sleeper. he's playing in a Seattle for a Seattle team that, you know, doesn't really have a lot of options. They're kind of rebuilding. I expect him to get a decent amount of playing time. Ty France's numbers are actually really solid on the year. He had pulling this up here, a 132 WRC plus, 368 OBP, 4 homers, and 155 at bats. If he could keep that OBP up, that would be great, but he had a 390 BABIP, so a lot of it might have been BABIP fueled. The exit velocity went down a bit from 2019. In 2019, he had a 294 OBP with a more kind of normal 279 BABIP, so I don't know if he's really ever going to become anything, but I think an interesting gamble for a team like Ruthvik and Knicks, who, you know, desperately needs hitters. I think Contreras is an interesting catcher prospect. I know he came up this year at the beginning of the year when the Braves catchers were both out with COVID and did solid, and maybe he becomes something, but I think catcher prospects are just largely, you know, kind of a big question mark. I think Adrian Morejon, I'm not sure if he ever becomes a full starter. I could see him more as a multi-inning bullpen piece, but I think he'll be given some chances to start in San Diego. I think the trades that they just made to get Snell and Darvish make it even less likely he starts a season in the rotation, though, when you consider they still have Lamet and Paddock and Gore and a couple of other guys. And Diego Castillo, I mean, I get it. Like, Rays bullpen, everyone loves these Rays pitchers, but he's just a setup man. I don't think he's anything that special. The numbers weren't amazing this year. So any thoughts on this trade?
Yeah, as a former Ty France owner, I mean, I traded him away because of the not so good StatCast stats, but he did have that insane AAA season where he had almost a 500 OBP in 2019. So there's definitely some upside there if he can tap into that in the majors. And yeah, I think the highest upside piece of this trade is probably Jackson Rutledge, because he has 2 plus pitches, a third that's above average. He just has a below average command grade on both the major sites. But hey, if he can make that a little bit better, then maybe he could turn into something good.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think the potential is there. And I mean, as it goes with all these pitching prospects, I just feel like you just never know, you know, whether injuries or you know, inability to develop a pitch or control or whatever. But I think Rutledge is a pretty good gamble for Ruthvik and Nick, especially with their love for starting pitching and pitching prospects as a whole. So definitely agree with that analysis. Anything else on these trades before we go into our segment?
Yeah, I kind of agree with the not really liking catcher prospects as much, but I know some of you may be thinking I'm one to talk. I have 2 catcher prospects, but I have them because like they have very specific traits that I like from the 2 of them, but I'm not seeing a ton of upside from Hernandez or Contreras just yet. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, but we'll see.
Definitely. Funny you only say 2 catcher prospects. You can't forget about the OG catcher prospect, Heriberto Hernandez.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, for now, yeah.
Behind the plate, but he's a catcher in my heart.
Yeah. That would be awesome if he could get that eligibility, but we'll see.
Absolutely. No, that would only make him more of an asset. But
let me just double check real quick, but I believe, yes, as of now, he only has catcher eligibility on ESPN, so that makes it seem like he will have catcher eligibility if he first comes up, and he's still had a few catcher games, but we'll see.
Ooh, I like that. And you know, the Rays in desperate need of a catcher, so maybe Heriberto Hernandez sticks behind the plate for a bit, or maybe he has like an Evan Gattis like role. He catches a little bit, but you know, mostly plays the outfield. And I kind of feel that same way with Alejandro Kirk right now. You know, he's kind of a big guy. There's questions of if he'll stick behind the plate, but like for fantasy purposes, just needs to play 20 games. You know,
yeah.
maintain eligibility. Maybe Heriberto can do that.
Yeah, we're both former Evan Gattis owners, so if Kirk or Heriberto can get that, then that'd be awesome.
I would love that. Yeah, I'd love him for him to come up, succeed, and then I could sell high on one of him or Sean Murphy. That would be fantastic. Before Cam got sick, the original plan was for me to do a segment about one Christmas present that everyone should want under their tree, meaning one kind of player that a team would really be helped by going out and acquiring. I think this is a segment I might push back until after New Year's and be like one present that everyone should want to start the new year. But given that Erik is on with me, and we're doing, and he's made the second most trades out of any team, and I've made the first most trades out of any team, I thought that we would move this segment up a week early. I am going to do a countdown of what was supposed to be 10, but I couldn't narrow it down to 10, so we're doing 12. The top 12 trades in league history, now that we've had 300, or I guess now 301. And the way that Erik and I are going to do this is that I am going to let Erik read off the even numbers. We're counting down from 12 to 1. And I will read out the odd ones. Erik has not seen this list. I made this list entirely by myself. So I will chat Erik each pick, each trade as we go. So he will be seeing these live, and he will be reacting just kind of off the top of his head here. So, yeah, I think this is going to be an exciting segment. And just to give you all a little sense of how I went through this, I copied every trade that I thought was like notable into like a document, and I got like over like 40, 50, maybe even a little more trades. And I just started cutting down that list, and I made multiple cuts over and over again. And I got to 25, and I was like, I don't think I'll be able to cut anymore, but I finally settled on 12. Which goes to prove just how crazy this league goes with trades. I mean, there was like Manny Machado is traded for Paul Goldschmidt this offseason, and that trade involved like 6 other pieces, and that trade didn't even crack this list. In a normal league, like that trade is probably one of their top trades, but like as you all know, we're not a normal league. So get ready for what I think are the 12 most memorable, biggest, whatever you want to call it, trades in M-SABR history. Are you ready, Erik?
Let's get it.
All right. Erik will read off the first trade now. It is in the chat.
All right. Number 12. One that involves both of us. Big League Yellow Champs has agreed to trade Gleyber Torres to Magic in the Hamptons for Brandon Woodruff, Jonathan VR, Shane Baz, Josh Young, Seth Corey, Dynamax 2021 first, Andrew's 2021 second, Sahil's 2022 first, and Alex and Daniel's 2022 second.
Yep. That was a big one. That broke the record for the most assets going one way in a trade in league history. I believe I got 9 players or picks going my way, and Erik got 1. Why don't we do it this way? Why don't you talk about your perspective of the deal and kind of what has happened with Gleyber since then, and then I'll talk about my perspective of the deal and what I've done with the players I acquired.
Yeah, for sure. Around that time, I was just trying to trade a bunch of pieces away for a star, and like Woodruff kind of did a lot better than I thought he would, so that's kind of a bummer. But anyway, I wanted to trade Woodruff. I wanted to get rid of VR because I don't know why I traded for him in the first place, to be honest. And I know Shane Baz and Josh Young and the first picks had a lot of value, so I just really wanted to package those to get a star. And of course, I traded him and Clev for Wander Franco, so I really like that.
That Wander Franco deal is really going to be interesting just to see how that plays out going down the road because, Clevinger out for the year with Tommy John. I wonder how he's going to look coming back. And, Gleyber has obviously been very good so far. I know he had a bit of a down year this year, but, I think he's one of the rising stars in the game. Plays a premium position, either second or short. And there's no guarantees with Wander, even though he is like an 80 grade, just generational prospect. But I think he did good in acquiring Wander. So I think this trade for you really hinges on whether or not Wander pans out. So from my perspective, you know me, I always love to be the guy who's getting the best and brightest star in the trade. And I'm usually the one trading like 6 random assets to go get the stud. But It took me a couple days to mull over this. It was really difficult, but ultimately I thought that the sum of the parts that you were giving me outweighed Glaber, and I thought I did very well with that. As a lot of people predicted, I immediately traded away pretty much every asset that you gave me. And they helped me acquire players such as Austin Meadows, who, as soon as I made this trade, I was immediately targeting. I remember Alex really wanted Barrios. I kept insisting on Woodruff. Finally, we closed on that deal. And it's funny because I ended up getting Woodruff back after I realized that he was better than Barrios. Overall, I felt like I really traded the different parts I acquired in that trade for more better pieces that I wanted, fixed a lot of holes, and it's really helped me build the caliber of team that I have right now. So very excited about that deal. But let's move on to our 11th ranked deal. Giovanni is a Wonderland, which was me the first season. That was my first or second team name. Agreed to trade Blake Parker to Bort Pujols for Yordan Alvarez. Nice, sweet, and simple trade here. So Blake Parker, as Erik knows very well, was traded around like everywhere that first year. And he would be traded and then dropped, and then someone would pick him up and it'd be like he'd be involved in another deal. And he was just moved around like crazy. Actually, let's see how many times he was traded. Only 3 times. It felt like he was traded more, but like Blake Parker's name came up a lot.
Yeah. He must have been added and dropped like at least 10 times in our league history.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I remember Cam was looking for a reliever. Parker was the closer of the Angels at that time. He lost the closer's job. I was like, fine, I'll trade him. And I was like, I want a Yordan Alvarez. He said, all right. I think they had a bit of a prospect crunch, and Yordan's value only got higher. My only regret was that I didn't keep him. I ended up trading him for Zach Greinke and Chris Archer at the trade deadline. Actually, some other pieces involved. Man, that was a 1, 2, 3, 4. There was 9 assets involved in that deal. But that helped me complete my rotation, and Greinke won a championship for me, and then I traded him away this offseason, reacquired him, and then traded him away again. Helped me get Max Fried, George Springer, and Max Muncy. So can't argue with that. But would be nice to have someone like Yordan Alvarez on my roster right now.
Yeah, I think I inquired about Alvarez at one point when you had him, but you said I think he's going to be the first baseman of the Astros for years to come, so I didn't think I'd be able to get him. And then you traded him away. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's not a bad deal because Parker helped you win, right? Or
Greinke did. Archer,
oh, yeah.
Archer ended up dumping for like a 3rd round pick later on. There's like a few other prospects and picks in that deal that were just kind of irrelevant. I did trade my 2020 first round pick in that deal, which kept changing hands and eventually ended up with Andrew, and Andrew took Riley Green with that pick.
Yeah. So yeah, I meant the pieces you got from him. But yeah, anyway, the deal definitely looks like a bummer for now, but like we all make our fair share of mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, look, I wouldn't trade that championship. Greinke had 2.5 great seasons on my roster, and he's helped me get some players I really like right now. As much as it sucks not to have Yordan, those flags fly high. They fly forever. But, yeah, let's go to trade number 10.
Oh, number 10. Team Cohen has agreed to trade Luis Robert, Jesus Luzardo, David Fletcher, Carlos Rodon, Austin Riley, to Yohan Moncada for Cody Bellinger, Mitch Keller, Jesus Sanchez, and Dansby Swanson.
Yeah. Why don't you start out talking about this deal?
Yeah, just immediate reactions. I love getting the best player in the deal, and he also got Mitch Keller and the guy who's been traded around like so many times, Jesus Sanchez, and a decent shortstop in Dansby Swanson, who could be breaking out too. So definitely like the deal on that side. And I know Mitch Keller didn't have a great season this year, but he's still pretty young, so maybe he can turn it around.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that sticks out for me with this deal, and one of the reasons I put it on this list, was just a number of like young stud assets that just got moved. You know, you have Luis Robert, who is one of the top, young outfielders in the league, as is Cody Bellinger, who's won an MVP. So, like, right away, you got two young studs who could potentially be top 10 dynasty assets moving forward. I mean, I would already call Bellinger a top 10 dynasty asset as is. But even beyond that, Jesus Luzardo, I think, is one of the top young starters in the league. I mean, I believe he was like the top ranked pitching prospect at the time and up until he lost his prospect eligibility. Mitch Keller has also been ranked as like a top 10 to 20 prospect at different points. And I think, like you said, there's definitely room for him to bounce back. Dansby Swanson broke out in a huge way this year, and people are talking about him as like a top 10 to 12 shortstop. David Fletcher broke out this year. He's like 26. He could play both second and shortstop. Even Austin Riley, I mean, hasn't really lived up to the potential, but he was really hot when he came to the majors. And, he's only played – I don't think he's even played a full season in the majors yet. And he was like a top 30 to 50 prospect at different points. And I know Carlos Rodon didn't turn into anything, and it doesn't look like Jesus Sanchez has turned into much at first glance, but you got to love how many times Jesus Sanchez has been traded. I think that leads the league.
He's been traded 8 times.
Yeah, so there you go. Let's put the over under here. How many more times do you think Jesus Sanchez appears on this list?
Let me just look up his stats real quick. I know they weren't like great, but
yeah,
in his first season, I don't know. He did not have a great year. It was only 10 games, but still, if he can improve, I mean, he's still a decent prospect. I know he hasn't had great OBPs the last 2 years in the minors, so we'll see. I feel like he'll get traded a few more times just because, like, the team that has him will get tired of him, and some team will like to want to take a chance on the top prospect pedigree, and I feel like that might happen a couple times.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I mean, boy, he's been involved in some big deals. But yeah, I mean, I just think the combination of all the big young studs that were traded and, Jesus Sanchez being in the deal made this the 10th ranked trade for me.
Yeah, and hey, if Luis Robert can fix that strikeout problem, and if Jesus Luzardo can turn into the ace that everyone expects him to be, then maybe Connor wins this trade.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if in 2 years we're looking at this deal and we're like Connor won. I think a lot of it also depends on the development of Mitch Keller and if Dansby Swanson can pick it up. And if Cody Bellinger, I mean, low key, he's kind of been like 1 year he's just like very great. The next year, like meh. That's kind of been his career so far. I think like this year in 2018 weren't as good, but 2019 and then his rookie year in 2017, he was really good. So I'll be curious if he like really just bounces back in 2021 and is just like that stud that like, we all remember from 2019.
Yeah, I think he will. I think the stats are still as studly as always, so I expect him to.
Yeah, I think so too. Would you agree? Do you think he's a top 10 dynasty asset right now?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, he was like a top 3 dynasty asset like going into this year, so I still think he's top 10.
Yeah. Let's go into our 9th trade. The Will Smith has agreed to send Alberto Mondesi, Michael Kopech, Tristan McKenzie, Ronnie Mauricio, Isaiah Kiner Falefa, Jesus Sanchez, he's back, Bruce Gratterall, Austin Hayes, and it's 2021 third-round pick to the Off-White Sox. I feel like I need to take a deep breath here because this is still a lot more to read. For Ozzy Albies, Victor Robles, Brian Hayes, Francisco Alvarez, Ethan Hankins, Zayna Max's 2022 first, and Clayton and Jake's 2022 third. This is a more recent trade, and if I remember correctly, this broke the record for the most assets involved in a single trade. I remember that this trade occurred during one of those winter meetings that we did in like October. And I mean, Andrew and Connor promised they were working on something big, and it's like, are they going to deliver? And then suddenly they just dropped this bomb in the chat, and we're all like, holy shit, like what just happened here? Even now, I have a hard time wrapping my head around this and just figuring out who won. But what are your thoughts on this deal, Erik?
Yeah, this is a really, really fun trade to just see go down. I remember after this trade, Anthony for the first time posted that thing about like, I ain't reading that, but happy for you. Or sorry that happened.
Classic moment in league history, yes.
Yeah, but just the amount of high upside pieces going on both sides, which is crazy. And honestly, I didn't really have an opinion on it for a while because I just had to read it over and over so many times.
Yeah, I'm still not even sure who's going to win this trade, and I feel like my mind keeps changing. But I want to highlight some of these pieces here. I mean, Mondesi is a player that you and I have talked about a lot, and he's just so polarizing. I think he's the most polarizing player in the league.
Yeah.
He has the 50-60 stolen base upside. If you stretch his season out this year, he would have hit for over 20 homers. After you traded him, he actually had this late season surge, and I know that you briefly mentioned that you were trying to reacquire him, but like the OBPs just aren't that good. Like I think he's on one season with an OBP over 300, and I mean he'll win you stolen bases, but he's just going to be such a suck at ODP or OBP where you're like, is it even worth it? But like 24 stolen bases in 59 games this year.
Yeah,
Like,
for
how
sure.
the hell do you beat that? That's insane.
Yeah, that was the reason why I hung on to him for so long, just because he could literally win you a week in stolen bases. And then he got off to a terrible start this year, so I thought he might have just been benched or like not even have a starting spot next year. So that's why I flipped him. But and he just goes on this incredible hot streak, so I don't know what to think of him.
We'll see if he's only 25. So if he can build on the end of the season next year, I mean, we could talk about someone who's like legitimately a top 25 to 50-ish asset. Maybe he's even there right now. I mean, maybe he just moves above the top 25 because I mean that power speed combo. I mean, off the top of my head, the only player I could think of who offered that upside at the beginning of their career was Trey Turner. Now, I don't think Trey Turner necessarily possesses a 2060 upside anymore. He might. He's peaked at 46 stolen bases and peaked at 19 homers, 12 and 12 this year. But, that type of player is rare. And even if he could get the OBP up a little bit, he'll be good. Kopech and McKenzie, I think, are both like high upside starters. And I know Connor's put a lot of emphasis in winning now, which I really like. But I also think Kopech and McKenzie are good young starters that could just be the anchor of his rotation for years to come if they both pan out.
Yeah, for sure. I really like both of those gambles that Connor took. And just looking from the other side real quick,
Yeah.
I think Ethan Hankins could really be something as well. He's in that excellent pitching development, and I think he was a former first round pick, so he could
He's
become
in
something
Cleveland,
as
right?
well. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, Cleveland knows how to develop pitchers, definitely. And two other players I'll highlight on the other side. Ozzie Albies, who I thought was just the best player in the deal, period. I think he's the top dynasty second baseman right now. I don't know what you think about that take, but I'd like to see him improve a little bit, but I'm not totally sold on his production yet. But I think that given his age and kind of the skill set that he has, I don't see anyone better.
yeah. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of him, but like given how weak the second base position is, then I probably agree. Yeah, he's a top second baseman.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, I think if I was starting a new dynasty league right now, I would wait a while to draft my first second baseman. I wouldn't be trying to get Albies, but I think he's kind of the best of a bad bunch. And even like the best of a bad bunch is still like someone who could be a top flight player. And Brian Hayes, I just wanted to highlight quickly because I think that he came up torrid in 2020 and he's moved up a lot of these rankings. And if he could keep any of that up, I mean, I know he's a great defensive reputation, but if he can keep any of that up, I mean, I've heard comparisons to Anthony Rendon, and I don't know if
Yeah,
he reaches Anthony Rendon level, but there's a lot to like, I think.
yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. And Victor Robles, too. I mean, he's had a slow start to his career, but he was a top 5 prospect at one point. So, and deemed better than Juan Soto. So you never know. Maybe he bounces back.
All right, number 8, the Life of Otto trades Eloy Jimenez, Bobby Witt Jr., Brendan McKay, Kirby Yates, and Sean Manaea to the Off-White Sox for Wander Franco, Luis Castillo, Jurickson Profar, and Keone Cavaco.
Yeah, just another one of these giant blockbusters here. It kind of reminds me of this Cody Bellinger trade. But let's start with you this time. What are your immediate thoughts?
Yeah, I like the side for Clay and Jake, although I think it's close because, I mean, you get an a proven ace in the deal. I mean, Brendan McKay, maybe he could turn into an ace. He still has that high prospect upside, but Luis Castillo is a proven ace, and you get the number one prospect in the deal as well. So
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I love Eloy. I think that he's going to be a very good player. Obviously, Connor's a White Sox fan, so he wanted him totally understand that. Bobby Wood Jr., I mean, is a top prospect as well, and Connor turned him into Barrios. I like that trade because I thought it signaled Connor was making this move more to win now, which was smart. I just think maybe he could have gotten a slightly better pitcher than Barrios, but he's young and is going to give you 200 innings, so no real complaints there. McKay, like you said, a lot of injuries. That definitely concerns me. I think his stock was a bit higher at the time of this trade, but definitely the injuries hurt. Kirby Yates and Shamanaya, actually, he traded both of those guys to me, and I've since traded both of them away. So they're no longer on his roster. And I think, like you said, on the other side, getting Wander Franco, we've talked about him ad nauseum. I'm not going to repeat anything there. And Luis Castillo is an ace. And especially with Clevenger getting hurt and with Clayton and Jake trading away Snell, I think Castillo is more important to their rotation, now more than ever. So definitely a great trade. And I mean, man, just like the Bellinger trade, just like look at all these giant pieces going.
yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe Bobby Wood Jr. could turn into the best piece in this deal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Who knows? It's the beauty of prospects. Let's move on to the 7th ranked trade here. This one back to the first season. Church of Hanagod, which was me, agreed to trade Michael Wacha, Scott Kingery, Ke'Bryan Hayes, and my first round pick that year, which turned into Brady Singer, to Anthony for Garrett Cole. And what I consider to be one of the more lopsided trades in league history. I'll tell the backstory behind this because I really love this. I was doing well the first half of the season, and obviously I was like, look, let's be aggressive. Let's, try and win a championship. And I was like, okay, well, let's go out and get some starting pitchers. So I noticed Anthony, who was struggling, had Cole, Corbin, Carrasco, Bauer, like you name it, he had it. So I was like, I traded for Corbin and Carrasco. I also got pretty good deals on them. Yeah, I traded David Robertson, Christian Pache, and Jonathan Loziga to get Corbin. And then for Carrasco, I gave up Dylan Bundy, Michelle Baez, and Shed Long for Carrasco, Zach Collins, and David Peterson. Maybe it looks a bit worse now with Bundy's breakout, but at the time, he just really wasn't doing anything. So I kept asking Anthony for Cole after that. He was insistent on keeping him. And finally, I remember Zane made the controversial Kershaw trade for Snell, the only trade that the Cohens made while they were in the league. If you remember their tenure as league owners. And that pissed me off. I was like, look, they're on their way out of the league. Like, EVO is going to try and compete. Like, look, I'm going to make a bigger push. And finally, I was like, look, I got to make this Garrett Cole trade work. So I got Garrett Cole. And he's still the ace of my rotation. And I couldn't be happier with him. So that's my story. I will say Ke'Bryan Hayes does definitely have the chance to, really establish himself. I mean, we just talked about him, and maybe Brady Singer does as well. But like Wacha has really fallen off, as has Kingery, who I actually picked up in free agency after someone else cut. So any thoughts on that trade?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it, just that trade, it looks like it could be even, depending how Ke'Bryan Hayes progresses his career. But I know Anthony traded away him like a week later, along with Trevor Bauer, for Chapman and Nimmo and Soroka. I mean, depending on how Soroka progresses, that trade could turn into a loss too. So yeah, definitely a good trade for you.
Yeah, I would say it's one that Anthony would like to have back. I think it's safe to say. But yeah, I mean, I agree. Ke'Bryan Hayes could definitely turn into something. But I mean, just the way Cole's pitched since he's been in Houston, like Ke'Bryan Hayes is going to have to make up a ton of value to make that an even trade. But definitely a great one. Ooh, let's talk about number 6. I'm really glad that you're reading out the even numbers because I really wanted you to read
No,
out this
I
trade.
already know what it is before you even send it. Oh no, it's not the one I was thinking of, but it is a bad one.
Yeah.
Waka it's a good trade. Jacob deGrom, Nick Anderson to Panic at the Frisco for Steven Strasburg and Jonathan VR.
Yeah. So before
I
I
mean,
tear you to shreds here, why don't you talk about your thinking at the time of this trade?
yeah, I mean, going into it, I wanted some more steals and I wanted to sell high on Anderson. So like, although like a couple months later, I decided I just didn't want Jonathan VR anymore, so I traded him to you in that Glaber deal. But honestly, the 2019 seasons from DeGrom and Steven Strasburg were not all that different. So that's kind of the main reason why I made that trade, because I wanted to get some steals. And then Strasburg is out for the year, so that didn't help me. But I was able to trade Strasburg for Ohtani, and then he was basically out for the year as a pitcher. So, but we'll see how Ohtani ends up. But I didn't really regard that trade when I made it. And I mean, given Strasburg injury history, it's probably not the greatest, but yeah.
Yeah. When you made this trade, I was like, what the fuck, man? Like DeGrom coming off the Cy Young. I've always liked Strasburg, the pitcher. I've never liked Strasburg, like in terms of staying healthy. He just hasn't been able to consistently do that. And I get like he did really well in 2019, but they're coming off the World Series run. He pitched a lot. They just signed him to that big contract. He's 32. I was like, if there's ever a pitcher you look at and you're like, this contract's just not going to go well because of the arm, I was like, this has to be the one. So I questioned that a bit. I didn't mind you trading Nick Anderson at his peak. I think I've made it very clear what I think about relievers and their volatility. And I mean, what Nick Anderson gave up runs in his last 7 appearances in the playoffs. He's not a top 60 dynasty asset like Ruthvik tries to sell him off as. And Ruthvik can keep him all he wants, but like that's just dumb. But I think no matter what, he wins this trade because DeGrom is just awesome and he's a consensus top 3 dynasty pitcher. And I think he still has a few more good seasons in him. So yeah,
If I knew DeGrom's average fastball velocity was going to go like over 100 this year, I wouldn't have made that. But hey, who knows?
No, I get it. Like hindsight's 2020. So I'm not going to argue, like the whole Strasburg health thing or like how you thought DeGrom was going to decline. And I get it was only a 60-game season, but like, I don't know, man. I had a hard time defending this deal from the beginning. I just didn't see it.
Yeah, I definitely should have taken the injury history more into account, but I definitely thought that their 2019 seasons weren't that much different. So that's basically why I did it.
No, that's very fair. And I love putting you on blast here. I know I just roasted myself with the Chapman for Jesus Sanchez deal, so I had to make sure I got in one bad trade of yours just to just to match it. But let's talk about the 5th ranked deal. This one's very wordy, and this one's actually a trade we talked about a couple weeks ago. Abor Pujols has agreed to trade Fernando Tatis Jr., Chris Paddock, Hunter Green, Kyle Lewis, Jason Hayward, and ZeniMax's 2019 second-round pick to Connor for Juan Soto, Austin Meadows, Ke'Bryan Hayes. How many times has Ke'Bryan Hayes showed up on this list? Like, holy crap. Mick Roberto, Luis Alexander Basabi, and Erik's 2019 first-round pick, which turned into Jarek Kelenic, who Cam still has. And there is a condition that if Juan Soto is to be traded from Abort Pujols, Yoan Moncada has a fair chance to match that offer within a draft pick of compensation. So Tatis versus Soto. I mean, I know we talked about this trade a couple of weeks ago in the podcast, but like, how could I keep this out of the top 12? I mean, we're talking 2 of the top 3 dynasty assets in the league right now. And you could argue that both of them are on the path to the Hall of Fame, just the way that they've started. And not just them, there are a ton of other like great pieces in this deal. So what are your thoughts, Erik? Because I gave my thoughts on the podcast a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I haven't really looked at this trade in a while, but it's just crazy looking at it. I mean, you got Tatis, Soto, like you said, 2 of the top 3 assets. You got Chris Paddock on one side. Austin Meadows on the other side. He looks pretty good. Brian Hayes on that side. And then you got Kyle Lewis. He looks to be pretty good so far. Hunter Green. He could be really good. I think he will be. But yeah, in the first round pick that turned into Kelnick. I mean, it's just crazy the amount of top-notch pieces that turned out.
No, absolutely. And I think what's funny to me is like you look at Connor and you're like, God damn it, he traded away Juan Soto. He's this rebuilding team. This is a guy he needs to keep. And then you look at like a year later and Tatis is like broken out in a similar fashion. You're like, oh, okay, this is all right. And then Connor trades away Tatis to go get Wander Franco. And I'm like, God damn it, Connor, just like stick with one of these studs. Like you're like he had Soto and Turner and Bellinger and Tatis on his roster all like at one point, and now he has none of them. And
traded for the guy with really bad swing and strike issues.
Exactly. And can I just say, like, I think Connor is like just like he's been involved in more of these trades with like top 10 players than anyone. Like I love how just like willing he is just to go out and just like make the big swing. So I mean, we call EBO big ballers, but man, Connor is a big baller himself.
Yeah, for sure.
But two more things I want to point out that are like fun facts. Jason Hayward was the last player that Connor owned from that trade. Like, can you believe that? Not Tatis, not Paddock, not Hunter Green, not Kyle Lewis, but Jason Hayward. And he just recently cut Jason Hayward after Hurricane Connor, which we talked about on the last podcast. And the second thing I'll talk about is Kyle Lewis is the only player in this league to be traded for himself. In another big trade that went down that I unfortunately had to chop off this list, I traded Anthony Rizzo, Liam Hendricks, and a player to be named later, who was Kyle Lewis, to Cam for Gleyber Torres and Kyle Lewis. The reason that Kyle Lewis was the player to be named later was that Cam still wanted to keep him, but did not have the roster space. So I was like, look, I'll take him on for a hot sec. I think it ended up being like 2 weeks, and then you can take Kyle Lewis back once he cleared up the space. He cleared up the space. Kyle Lewis was traded for himself. No one saw it coming. Mind's blown.
Yeah, worked out for me.
Yeah. Oh, no, definitely.
The funny thing is the original talks in that deal were for Aquino, but I just blatantly said I think you value Aquino a lot more than I do. So I mean, he said something like, what would you offer for him? And I said like a second. And then he said, I wouldn't do that for Aquino, but I do that for Kyle Lewis. And then I said, okay. And then he asked for a third like a day later, and I said, deal.
Oh, man. I mean, like at that point, when you made that trade, the Reds had already signed Nick Castellanos, right? And they already had Shoko Akiyama. They had Jesse Winker. They had Senzel in the outfield mix. Like, it was so predictable that Aquino was not going to, like, get consistent playing time. Like, why wouldn't Cam just trade him? And I want to say Cam just cut him, like, a couple weeks later, like, once they realized, like, he's starting to season in the minors. So,
yeah, I picked him up at one point, too.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Just Cam, you done goofed. But we all make mistakes. Anything to roast Cam. Let's go to the fourth-ranked trade. And once again, I really am glad that Erik gets to read this one off.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Thought this would be number one. But Anyway, Magic the Hamptons has agreed to trade Steven Strasburg, Charlie Blackmon, and Grayson Rodriguez to executive batting order for Shohei Ohtani and Jeremy Pena.
Yeah. This is the only trade in league history that genuinely made me go like, what the fuck? Like I remember draft day when Zane and Max like took the Ohtani sticker and cut like the pitcher part in half and the hitter part in half and put it on the sheet. And they were like, oh, we're never going to trade Ohtani. And then like the classic like quote for me that's like, if I hear Shohei Ohtani's name one more time in the next 24 hours, I'm going to kill someone. And they're like the pitcher or the hitter, hence the name of our podcast. And I just can't believe that they traded him. Like it was just so genuinely mind blowing to me. I just, what's funny too is earlier that day, I traded you Javi Baez and Carlos Carrasco for Trevor Story.
Damn, I did not know those were in the same day. I forgot about that.
Same day. And also the same day as the great 2023 third-round pick for Alex Faedo trade. So the real star of the day. But like, I thought the Trevor Story deal would be like the biggest news of the night, and then like suddenly it's like wham, you all come in with Ohtani, and I'm like, holy fuck. But why don't you talk about your perspective on this deal and I mean, kind of your thought process behind the trade?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite part of all of it was your comment. You're like, there are days you're gonna remember for the rest of your life, and this is one of them.
Yep.
I thought that was hilarious. And yeah, I mean, this only happened if I had this combination, Strasburg and Blackman, and I happened to get Strasburg from the ground deal, and I happened to get Blackman from Andrew for our first trade we ever made together. And then Strasburg is one of Max's favorite Nationals, and I know Zane is a Rocktober fan, so like that was the only way that this happened. And I reached out to him. I was like, I know you're probably not going to deal him, but I just wanted to inquire on Ohtani. And then I offered Lynn and something else, and then it eventually got to those two guys, and it happened.
Yeah, I mean, just I'm speechless. Like, it's still like, and it's interesting though because like, as you mentioned earlier, Strasburg missed most of the season with injury. Ohtani missed most or all of the season with injury. Charlie Blackmon hit like 400 to start the season, and then like hit like 200 the rest of the way. And who's the other piece here?
Oh, Grayson Rodriguez.
Yeah, Grayson Rodriguez is a solid prospect, and he netted Eugenio Suarez in a deal that I kind of get why Cam did, but I'm also still like, eh. But the real star of the trade, in my opinion, was Jeremy Pena. I was the only one who got that trivia question right, and wasn't even my trade. You two didn't get it right. But yeah, like you said, just one of those moments I will remember for the rest of my life, and I can't wait to keep voting for that on our defining moments brackets for years to come.
Yeah, I mean, if Grayson Rodriguez turns into a legitimate ace, then maybe I lose this trade. But I mean, I was definitely willing to include him to get Ohtani off of EVO.
No, yeah, I mean, I think the more and more I think about this, given Strasburg's age and injury history, and given Blackman's age, like even if Ohtani bounces back and is like, even if he only hits and becomes a solid bat, or even if he is able to do both, but there are some limitations, or he's not perfect pitching or whatever, I still think this deal could easily become a win for you. I still think it's up in the air right now, but a lot of it just depends on Ohtani's health and you know, if he could get on the field. Because if he can get on the field, I mean, he's proven he's electric, but we just need to see it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to take away some good news out of my disaster season last year is that Ohtani only pitched like 3 games, so he gets a lot of time to recover and hopefully be like set for next year. And like even if the whole pitching thing doesn't work out, I still think he's an all-star caliber pure hitter if he only hits.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think he still has a long, solid career ahead of him. And he's not that old. He's 26. Yeah. Like, he's got plenty of time. Yeah, and 151 WRC plus his first year, 123 to second year. I mean, homer, stolen bases, he does it all. He'll be fine. Number 4 was shocking, but number 3, when I saw it, just made me angry. The executive batting order sent Paul Goldschmidt, Andrew Benintendi, Spencer Howard, and Andres Jimenez, and the awesome Nico Goodrum to Acuna Matata. By that point, without Acuna, but not named without Acuna, in exchange for Mookie Betts and Mike Yastrzemski. When we're talking about lopsided deals, I think that was one of the most lopsided deals in league history, arguably the most. One more thing I'll add too is I was debating between putting in this trade and the Acuna for Betts deal. And I kind of want to talk about both of them if that's all right with you. But yeah. Ruth Vick traded Mookie Betts, Max Fried, Royce Lewis, and Yuki's 2021 first-round pick to Alex for Dinelson Lamet, Nate Pearson, and Ronald Acuna Jr. So this is my list, so I make the rules. We'll talk about them in tandem here. I can only pick one. I thought that the Acuna Betts deal is obviously the bigger deal with the bigger pieces, but I think just kind of given the shock value and just kind of how big of a rip-off the Betts Goldschmidt deal was, that in just the league's reaction, I think that kind of narrowly edged it out for me. What are your thoughts? Honestly, I'm kind of regretting ranking the Ohtani trade at 4 and putting this at 3. I think I probably should have flipped them. Yeah, what are your thoughts? Then I'll get into my thoughts more to specifics, but you go first.
Yeah, this is the most pissed I've been about a deal by far. Strictly because I made a much better offer for Mookie Betts. I mean, it involved something like Julio Rodriguez and something else. I mean, I eventually traded Rodriguez to Alex for Jose Ramirez and other stuff, but yeah, I was just extremely pissed because, like, Goldschmidt, he's solid, but he's old. Benintendi, he's a bust. Like, we know exactly who he is at this point. He's never going to live up to the top prospect status that he had. And, like, Spencer Howard, I'm still a fan of him, honestly. I think he could become something, but I mean, to get Mookie Betts and to top it all off, Mike Yastrzemski, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, and granted, I don't think anyone thought Yastrzemski was going to keep this up. I'm certainly not that high on him this season, but like even that aside, I think this is still a clear win for EVO. And I mean, I agree with all your points. I mean, I know Alex and Zach think Howard is a top 25 starting pitcher. Moving like in the future, Jimenez has some value. EBO actually got Goldschmidt back. So it's like they lost him and they got him back. I mean, they gave up Manny Machado to go get him, but like I thought it was still a solid deal for them to get him back. And Mookie's a top 5 player. We saw what he did for EBO down the stretch. I don't think EBO makes the finals without the contributions of Mookie Betts.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that EBO was like at the way bottom of the league at one point, and they made it up real quick with all the excellent trades that Zane made.
Yeah, just absolutely. I mean, kudos to Zane. I mean, I think he does a great job of pivoting and making bold moves as anybody in this league. And you know, he's really just remade this team on a dime. And the results speak for itself here. I mean, Mookie Betts is a big baller. Just good for them. And like I said, the reason I put this trade so high was I think this is the single most lopsided trade in league history. And I think that this trade, when I saw this, pissed me off more than any other trade, other than maybe the Kershaw for Blake Snell deal that they made year 1. And that wasn't even because of the value of the trade. It was just because of who they made it with. This purely the value of the trade, I think, is the biggest ripoff in league history.
Yeah.
But let's talk about, because I brought it up and because I want to talk about it, the other deal. Because there are a lot of pieces here that moved. Funnily enough, this happened the day before the Ohtani deal. So, like, what a crazy couple of days that was. But I actually remember this. So it was a Monday, and I came back to my apartment early after class, and I was talking to Ruthvik, and he was talking about potentially trading Mookie. I was like, look, the only way you trade him is if you get Acuna. And he was driving that day. He's like, let me ask Alex. And by the time he finished his drive, he had Acuna. And I think it was part of the reason I didn't put this above or put this instead of the other Betts deals, because I kind of knew that this was coming personally. So it didn't come as big of a surprise. But if you look at the players that were dealt, I mean, Fried and Lamet had 2 of the best seasons of any pitchers in the National League this year. And they're both young, have a lot of upside. We've talked about Royce Lewis a lot. I know that you're a lot higher on him than I am, but he's still a top 10 prospect. Yuki's 2021 first-round pick is a top 5 pick, and Nate Pearson, I mean, was arguably the top pitching prospect in the league. I mean, I'd probably say Mackenzie Gore still, but I mean, you could make a reasonable argument he was a top pitching prospect. So, I mean, this is just another one of those star-studded trades in a league that makes so many that I'm like kind of like conditioned, and I see this and I'm like, all right, it's just another one.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, I know Alex thought Yuki's first would be like a top 3 pick or something, but he's actually 8 right now. But even then, I don't know. I think I slightly side with Alex on this deal because I know Acuna is probably better than Betts just because of the age difference, but I like Fried a lot more than LeMay because I know a lot of people have talked about LeMay just being a ticking time bomb in terms of his arm. He's just, any day it's going to happen that he's going to have to require another Tommy John surgery.
Yeah, I mean, he was injured the season before this one, and he pitched 60 good innings this year. I mean, I think it's a promising start. But I don't know if he keeps this up. I mean, I know Ruthvik really hopes so, and I think that he has the potential to. But I mean, I want to see it for 180 innings before I buy in, and I'm not ready to buy in on him. Pearson with the arm injury to end the year is concerning me a bit. Again, what's funny to me is that Alex has traded away everybody from that trade. Doesn't have Betts anymore. Doesn't have Freed. Doesn't have Lewis, and I believe he's traded away Yuki's pick.
Yep, I have that pick.
Yep. So, and I got Freed. So there you go. Now on Ruthvik's side, he's traded away Pearson, but he still has Lamet and Acuna. So interesting to see how that one plays out moving forward. But two very big trades involving Betts there. Let's go into number 2 here. It's the last trade that you are going to announce. Do you think I'm gonna have one of your trades again here?
I feel like the story one has to be on there.
Oh, here it is.
Ooh, well, it is a story one, but not the one I was thinking of. Although this is a really big trade, obviously. The Big League All Champs agreed to trade Trevor Story, Jose Barrios. It's 2021 first, my 2021 second. It's 2025 first. It's 2025 second. A future first and a future second to UVO for Fernando Tatis Jr. and Giovanni Gallegos.
Yup. Big one. Again, we did a whole podcast episode pretty much just on this trade, so I'm not going to go into all the nitty-gritty. But, I mean, the reason I put this – like there are a lot of big blockbusters involving a lot of, like, top-name players. I mean, Betts has been traded. Acuna has been traded. We've talked multiple Tatis deals on here already. What separated this deal for me was the conditions attached to it. So we have these MVP conditions. If either one of them wins an MVP in the next 5 years, whether Story or Tatis, the other team has to set, or the team who acquired that player has to send the other team a first and a second round pick. This trade involved trading future picks. So, I mean, I just satisfied the first round pick, the future first round pick condition in the Heriberto Hernandez deal.
Heriberto.
Yeah, God bless Heriberto, man. What a big baller. So I still have to satisfy a future second round pick condition. But like, there's also the whole like there's some pressure on me too, because like if I hadn't fulfilled that first round pick, I would have had to given them like 2 first round picks in the 2020s or 3 first round picks in the 2030s. There's also some conditions with the second round picks like that. And I told a trade story like on an earlier podcast, so I'm not going to go through with explaining it, but I think just like given the conditions, it just and kind of the shock value of the trade, I just like that separated it for me from all these other like massive deals that we made.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just I don't want to call a winner or a loser because I know Tatis, I definitely would rather have him than Story, but Zane gets so many first-round picks and possibly more if Tatis wins the MVP, so I think it's pretty even.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's reasonable to expect Tatis to win an MVP in the next 5 years. I think Story could do it, but I'm not sure he will. But again, if Tatis is winning the MVP, I don't give a crap what I have to give to Zane to have him on my roster. And I've explained my concerns with Story not having as many years and potential drop off. But yeah, Zane got a haul. He's a top 3 dynasty asset. You got to pay a haul. And I mean, I'm happy with Tatis no matter what happens. So a great trade for both sides. I think we both got what we want.
And I honestly I didn't think that future first thing would happen so fast, but like kudos to Zane for driving up the price on Heriberto, so he could get a lot more from that deal than he originally thought.
No, I thought that was so funny where he had the rant about like, oh, you're giving Sahil all this, you're just a shitty prospect, yada yada yada. And then he like apologizes to me because he's like, I hope I didn't break the trade up. And then he's like, oh, you know what? I went in on this. So, just like I let you two compete for a while and finally was like, fuck it, let's just put it all together, So I think that's also kind of built into this. And one more side note I'll bring up with the Heriberto. This was the first time a draft pick was traded twice in the same trade. I gave Zane the 2025 first in the initial story for Tatis deal. And then he was going to send a 2025 first back to me in the Heriberto deal, but that pick reverted right back to him. So technically, he traded for my 2021 first, my 2025 first, and then my 2025 first again.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, it's kind of a trade-off. Would you rather like wait a few years, hoping, I mean, see what pick Sahil you eventually give him, or would you rather have like a shit ton of seconds now?
yeah, no, it's a hard decision. And I mean, I like the decision I made because I was like, look, like I could give him what I perceive to be the absolute worst pick I could give him, which is my 2025 first to complete the deal. But
I mean, it doesn't really matter because the first would automatically go back.
Well, yeah, but like hypothetically, I wouldn't want to have acquired, say, like the third overall pick in the 2022 draft and have that go to Zane.
Yeah,
because it would have been the next first round pick. Unless I worked out some sort of arrangement with him, I wouldn't have had the option to. And odds are, if he thought it was going to be a top 3 pick, he wouldn't be making that arrangement with me. So, that's it's a tricky one. So Zane has been involved in the last 3 trades, 2, 3, and 4. Do you think he's involved in number 1?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it is. With the number 1 trade in league history, in my opinion, is still the very first trade that this league made. Zane and Max send prospects Juan Soto and Brendan Rodgers to Connor in exchange for Trey Turner. Still a classic in my opinion. Only EVO would manage to fuck up with trading Juan Soto and still come up with a top 10 dynasty asset because of it. Like just a shock value. You knew that the first couple of months of this league kind of went by a bit slowly. And it's funny, I was doing a seasonal league at the time, which had so much more priority to me. And like I was checking this team, and I think I might have even forgotten to check the lineup a couple of times. I was like, all right, nothing's really happening here. Like whatever. That other league is making a bunch of trades, and I'm finally like Zane and Max just dropped the hammer, and that's when I knew. I was like, shit, this is a big baller league. And it's lived up to expectations, and we're 300 trades in now, and this league has been everything that I could have wanted and more. And I think this first trade, just in the way it went down and how these players have developed and how it was announced and everything, I think just truly embodies the spirit of this league. So I can't think of a better trade to put at number 1. There was no debate for me for whether or not this trade would be number 1. This is just the easiest decision of them all.
Yeah, I remember as soon as the trade was made, Max Bro criticized Connor's side. Like, why would you trade that guy for 2 prospects?
Yep. And boy, was he wrong. But I mean, I don't think anyone could have predicted that Juan Soto was going to do this, not even Connor.
Yeah.
And again, funny how Juan Soto and Brendan Rodgers no longer on Connor's team. So just a crazy time that we have had in this league so far. 300 trades, I guess now 301. And boy, I can't wait to see what the next 300 more are going to be like.
Yeah, maybe all 300 will happen in 2021.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think it's very possible, low-key. Like, I mean, you look at 2018, 59 trades in like a 9-ish month span. 2019, we upped that number to 75. But in 2020, that number grew to 167. And I think what one of the big differences is when we started this league in 2018, I think about half of the members were really committed and guys that I expected to stick around long-term. But we've had a lot of great additions to the league, owners-wise, over the past couple of years, and I feel like we finally have a solid group of 12 teams. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see this number grow. Here's a fun game to play. It took us until December 19th of 2020 to make the 300th trade. We started the league obviously in April of 2018. When do you think the 600th trade will be made?
Hmm.
Give me a year, give me a date. I want to write this down so we have this on the record.
I'd say January 15th, 2022.
Wow. So you are expecting over the next like a little more than a year, we are going to make 300 or 299 trades.
Yep.
God damn. I hope that's the case. But you know what? You say January 15th, 2022. I'm gonna say October 15th, 2022. Because I think no, I'm already doubting that prediction. Because I want to say it's gonna be sooner. You know what? I'm gonna say whatever the exact date of the trade deadline is in 2022, because we don't know that date off the top of our head right now, that will be the day that the 300 trade will be made. And I've written those down, and we will revisit that prediction. I promise you, we will have you on
Yeah.
the podcast. But man, I mean, even for us, I think I hope you're right. I hope my prediction is wrong, and I hope yours is right, because that would be insane.
Yeah. Interesting to see.
Yeah. Oh boy. All right. So I'd like to thank you all for listening to this segment. I had a lot of fun making this list, and Erik, I appreciate you coming on to discuss all these trades with me. It's always nice to go down memory lane. Before we go, I know that there is one thing that Erik wanted to mention. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to congratulate Connor on the podcast for his fantasy football championship, the first non-me, you, or ABO team to win a championship. And it is very deserving because his team was absolutely dominant. I mean, I don't know how you could have done better. He had Patrick Mahomes, Devontae Adams, DJ Metcalf, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, and he got Jalen Hurts for the final few games. I mean, it's crazy how good his team is.
God damn. Yeah, Connor's going to be a force to be reckoned with, and I hope he's a force to be reckoned with in the Dynasty Baseball League very soon as well. I appreciate some more competition. But yeah, I'd like to thank Erik for coming on and filling in at the last second. And we are recording this in December 2020, but you're probably not going to hear this until after the new year. So happy new year to everyone. I hope 2021 is a much better year than 2020 was. We would like to thank you all for listening to the podcast in 2020, and can't wait to see what 2021 has for the podcast. With that, we are going to go into a commercial break, and then we are going to have Cam come on and do his interview. This was recorded before he was diagnosed with the coronavirus. And once again, would like to wish Cam a good luck in his recovery from the virus, and hope he is doing well. All right, we are back. I'm joined by Erik McKean, owner of the Stanton Stranglers, who has graciously agreed to join us to interview Cam for his off-season preview. Thanks for coming on, Erik.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, Cam, let's start off here by just talking about your off-season generally. Unlike a lot of the teams in this league, you haven't really made too many big moves. But how do you feel about your offseason overall? And, do you think that there's some big moves coming down the pipeline, or are you largely content with the kind of the minor tweaks that you've made this offseason?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for having me on the show. I'm a longtime fan, and it's always been a dream of mine to get interviewed. So thank you again.
Anytime.
Yeah, I know all the people back home are going to be excited to hear this. And yeah, I think I'm very content with my off season. I have made mostly smaller moves, but I felt like, I didn't really see a need to make big moves. I made my big moves last off season in acquiring Mike Moustakas and Anthony Rizzo. And during the season, I acquired Hyun-Jin Ryu, as well as a couple of relievers. And I figured most of my heavy lifting has been done already. I believe Ruthvik said the same thing when he came on. And mostly it's just, like you said, making tweaks, filling in little holes. I felt like I needed a bench outfielder, so I acquired Jock Peterson. for rather cheap. I felt like I needed a bench middle infielder, so I acquired Gene Segura for very cheap. And then I dumped a couple guys like Tyone and Semien who in Tyone's case was hurt and didn't have a spot, and then Semien's case just really struggled, and I felt it was time to cut my losses there. Not that I invested a whole lot into him. Erik would disagree, considering how much he values Leody Taveras. But in general, I think my small moves really helped round out my roster in a very good way.
That's what I like to hear. Glad to, see that you have rounded out your roster pretty effectively here. Although I guess not really glad because you're one of my bigger rivals, but glad to hear that there's going to be some real competition this year.
I appreciate you calling me a rival.
Of course. So you do have a few players coming off down years here, notably Chris Bryant, Joey Gallo, Jock Peterson didn't have the strongest year, and Aaron Judge missed a lot of time with injury. Do you have any concerns about these, guys kind of bouncing back, or do you think that 2020 is just an aberration and you're ready to put your full faith in them and just roll in 2021?
Well, sometimes I do feel a little hypocritical in the sense that when a player has a great 2020, I'm like, yes, this is the new them. And when a player has a down 2020, at least on my team, I think that it's definitely an aberration. But I don't know. I think it depends on the player a lot. Chris Bryant definitely had there's some weirdness in the sense that he very clearly does not seem to be happy in Chicago. So I'm thinking maybe that could have played into it. Although we were saying before we came on that he's an incredibly difficult player to gauge. Who were some of the other guys you mentioned?
Joey Gallo, Jock Peterson, and Aaron Judge.
Chris Paddock.
Yeah, Paddock concerns me, but I just looking at his pedigree, how great he was in 2019 with the innings limit, and I'm just thinking having a full season of him, no limits, could be beneficial to him. I am a little worried. He is a two-pitch guy, so I'm worried that could translate to him being in the bullpen down the line. But I'm fully bought in on him. Joey Gallo, the on-base percentage is great, and he's a very easy source of home runs, especially during a full season. And God, I know people say this, but if he just learned to bunt down that third base line, imagine that. And yeah, Jock Peterson, let me pull up his Fangraphs page because I know there's something I loved about it.
Yeah, I'm not loving his 287 OBP this year, but I'm sure that his profile is not all that bad.
Yeah, so Jock Peterson, he did have a 285 on base percentage, but I think you need to take that into context. The walk rate was just a tiny bit lower than in the past, but not a whole lot. And I think that the large drop in on base percentage is mostly because of the 200 BABIP. Compared to in every previous year, at least the last three, it was between 240 and 255. So very consistent there. And this year it cratered to 200. And they're really, looking at his other numbers, there doesn't seem to be any reason for that. This year he had by far the highest exit velocity of his career, just under 93, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is one of the top numbers in the league in that category. So he is hitting the ball even harder than he was before. I personally think this was a weird year for him, and he's ready to bounce back.
Awesome. I don't want to leave you out, Erik. What questions do you have?
I was just looking up Peterson real quick, and yeah, his xWOBA was 325 this year, so it's a lot higher than the 287, so that's good. Well, anyway, major league questions before I put a prospect one in there.
Oh, yeah. Well, I did have one more major league question. Actually, two more, I think. Let's start with the first one here. Vlad Jr., I remember when you drafted him, you were like, he is absolutely untouchable. He's my guy. And he's come up and he's been solid, but I guess relative to the expectations that he was going to come up and just play like Juan Soto has, for example, he hasn't quite met that. How are you feeling about Vlad? Are you still very confident in him? Do you have any concerns with his play over the first 2 years? And do you still expect him to be a fixture on your team moving forward?
I definitely think that I still have a higher opinion on him than the rest of the league does, which I would say pretty much means I'm holding on to him for a while. And I'm certainly happy with that. He's going to be first base eligible only next year, which may make things a little more difficult. just in terms of squeezing things around. But with Alec Baum having third base eligibility, that should clear itself out and be totally fine. Vlad, I mean, he obviously had the 402 batting average in AA, WRC pluses in the high 170s, upwards of 200 even, all through the minors. And he came up, and he's been, I guess, good, not great is the way you describe it. It's been underwhelming, certainly. But if this was any other name, you'd think it was totally fine, especially for a 21-year-old. I'm certainly not jumping ship. I have, I guess, entertained him in trade offers for the first time ever, which I guess take that for what it's worth. But he's another guy. He had a 92.5 mile per hour exit velocity this year, which is, I guess, Peterson-esque. And he doesn't strike out very much. And the slugging percentage this year was up 30 points. I think there's certainly no reason to suggest that he won't be slugging 500 regularly in the future and that he won't be maybe a 30 home run guy.
Yeah, no, I definitely still think that he could be a very solid contributor. I don't know if he's ever going to reach the level of like Acuna, Soto, and Tatis. I think he might end up a step below that, but I really like him as well. I think it's a great analysis.
Certainly, that's kind of how I feel at this point, but that would be more than worth the hype.
Easily.
Yeah, and some guys, it just takes a few years. Like Devers didn't really do anything before his third year, so this is Vlad's third year going to be, right?
Right.
Yep.
And I mean, this was a shortened year, so he hasn't really had a full season in the majors. I mean, even this year, they're talking about having another shortened season potentially. So,
and not to mention, he's 6 months younger than Juan Soto.
That's crazy to think. He's going to be a good one. Whether he plays first or third, he will have a lot of value to you, or even if he just becomes a DH only player. Let me ask one last major league question, then I'll turn it over to Erik to talk about your farm and the draft. Your rotation, I think the league has a sense that Yumi and Ruth, they kind of have a monopoly over the starting pitchers, which I would kind of agree with. You had a lot of good. I mean, Trevor Bauer had a fantastic year. You know my thoughts on him and just a little bit of the skepticism, but there's no denying the results here. And then Ryu had a great season, has a solid track record. Darvish, same thing. How are you feeling about your rotation? I mean, I know like I said a lot of good things here, but there's also on the flip side, Darvish and Ryu are aging a bit. Trevor Bauer has never had a full 162-game season. Or I'm sorry, he's had only one full 162-game season with an ERA under 4. You have Syndergaard coming off Tommy John. I mean, he's still young. I think he could be very good. And obviously, I would be remiss not to mention that you own Kyle Freeland. What are your thoughts on your rotation?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say that Kyle Freeland has been done to death, so I'm not going to be hearing any Kyle Freeland questions.
Yeah. Please don't go into him. We've talked about him to death.
I love my rotation. I think it'd be nice if I could make my rotation a little bit younger, and I'll talk about that later on with guys like Darvish and Ryu, who are getting up there in age, but are still putting together the best seasons of their careers. But yeah, my guys are phenomenal. We talked about Paddock earlier. Bauer, I have no doubts that he is going to find ways to keep improving because he is the poster boy for improving, for looking at the numbers to improve himself. Who else? Yeah, Darvish was great this year. And really it was just the one bad stretch when he came over to the Cubs. But the second half of 2019, he was striking out everybody and not walking a single batter. And this year he really followed through on that. So I think that he's still got another year or two of elite performance in him. And we haven't even mentioned Zach Wheeler or Walker Buehler yet, but Wheeler, I think, is an incredibly underrated pitcher somehow, even for a guy who many people thought was overpaid going into the offseason. But he's terrific. And Walker Buehler is going to be the cornerstone of my rotation for years to come.
Yeah, I mean, Wheeler, I think, kind of flew under the radar just with, like, Nola having the great season, kind of topping that rotation. Do you have any concerns of Buehler only pitching 36 and 2/3 innings this year?
Not particularly. He's, 26 now?
Yeah.
Yeah, this year, I guess, was worse than his first 2 seasons in the majors. That's certainly undeniable. But I'm not concerned at all about that. I guess some of the numbers this year weren't the best, and he only made 8 starts. But I know I'm gonna contradict some of the stuff I said about other players, but I think it's just a short, weird season, and he's going to be able to pitch 180 innings in subsequent years.
No, I think that's very fair. I think Bueller's one of the safer pitchers, and I agree. It's kind of a case by case basis. Who are you making excuses for? Because of COVID, and who doesn't quite deserve that pass. So totally understand that. But I know Erik has some questions about the draft and the farm system, so I'm gonna let him ask his questions. Go ahead, Erik.
Yeah, I was just gonna wanted to know your thoughts overall on the farm system. I know you got a lot of high pedigree guys like Rutschman, Kelenic, Adele, who is still prospect eligible in our league, but not like according to the like MLB day active thing or whatever. And the news just coming out that Madden wants him to start in AAA will be nice because he still has not passed the prospect eligibility, so that'll be good for you. But yeah, what are your thoughts overall on your farm?
Yeah, I had not heard that Madden wants Adele to start in AAA, so that is very, very good news to me because I still love him. I think he's going to be a cornerstone in the corner outfield for them, but he clearly needs work. He's not ready quite yet for the majors, and he showed that in his time this year. But besides him, I love my farm system. We've done a few different farm system rankings in the league, and I'm consistently in the top 2 or 3. I believe of the 3 rankings, Connor leads in 1, I lead 1, and Anthony leads in 1. And yeah, my top guys, Rutschman's going to be my catcher of the future. Jared Kelenic is a guy I drafted 12th overall and has just had a meteoric rise. Vidal Brujan, I have a lot of confidence in, assuming they can find a place for him to play. And then if you go deeper down the list, there are guys like Jeter Downs.
George Valera.
Yeah, George Valera. And we talk a lot about guys like in the Heriberto Hernandez vein who are very young and have crushed it in the low minors. And I think George Valera and Brian Rocchio are 2 names to watch just because not only have they hit well in the minors, but there's kind of a consensus forming around the 2 of them that they are kind of elite young international prospects. And I think overall, there are really only a couple guys that I'm not confident could be cornerstones for my team.
Yeah, it seems like it's mostly the batters, but you got really good pitchers in Grayson and Clark Schmidt right now, so that's definitely something to like.
Yeah, I hadn't even mentioned Grayson, but he's a guy I had really wanted to acquire for a long time, and I found the right deal to acquire him and Nolan Gorman, who's another guy that I've been interested in for a while.
Yeah, so you already said your thoughts on the draft a lot, but since you do have 1 pick, I just wanted to get your thoughts on it overall. Do you think you're going to keep that pick? Do you think you're going to trade it? And just what do you think?
That's a good question. I'm thinking maybe I'll keep it for a little while just to, I guess, force myself to scout the draft at some point. Because as of right now, I have done absolutely no scouting. And so I have no clue who would be available at 29 or who would be a steal for me at 29 should they fall there. Yeah, I think I do want to hold on to it into the new year. And because the draft is when? Sometime in February?
Yeah, I think the international signing period starts January 15th, so we should wait like a couple weeks after that to do it.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Yeah, like I said, I want to hold on to it now just to force myself to scout these players in a way because, like I've said, it is difficult to scout them just by the stat sheet, which doesn't exist. But I have no attachment to holding on to that pick. And as of now, I can't imagine whoever I pick there really having room in my farm system. I'm sure I can make room, but I might need to shuffle a few things around. So it's, I guess right now, it's up in the air, and I haven't really given too much thought to it.
Yeah, I got one last question while we're talking about the farm system here. Cam, you mentioned trading for Grayson Rodriguez and Nolan Gorman. You traded Eugenio Suarez in the middle of the season to get them. At the same time, you traded Jazz Chisholm to get Hinge on Ryu. you were obviously kind of competing throughout the season for a championship, and we know how close you came for making it to the finals and likely demolishing EBO in the finals, just given how your team performed. So it seems like you were kind of balancing like trying to compete by getting someone like Ryu, but also trying to get some prospects that you like. Do you think you're going to be a bit more aggressive now that you're in more of a win now mode to acquire some, high-end, major league talent? Or do you think that you're still going to kind of have this approach of when the opportunity comes up to get a prospect that you really like, even if it hurts kind of your major league roster now, you're going to go for it?
Yeah, so it'll probably be a mixture of both. I mean, looking at the examples you gave from last season, those trades were done a few weeks apart. And when I made the first trade, it was a little bit of a reaction to me slipping from first to fourth or fifth in the standings in a short amount of time. So I was freaking out a tiny bit, but even looking back on it, I think that it was an incredible value for me. So I have no regrets about the trade because, like I said earlier, I acquired two guys that I love. For Suarez, who had an iffy year, and he was a little iffy towards the end of the season last year, and I worry about having too many Reds on my team, and just in terms of jinxing myself or something. Yeah, but the Ryu deal, I guess, does in a way signal that I am selling prospects to an extent, because I traded away Matthew Liberator and Jazz Chisholm for him. Chisholm being someone I had acquired just a bit earlier, and Liberator being someone I acquired in the offseason was very high on. And I think it'll probably be more of the latter than the former this coming season. I plan on probably clearing out a few of my prospects, certainly not Rutschman or Kellenic, but maybe someone in the vein of Bruhan or Clark Schmidt, or even some of the guys in the lower minors like George Valera or Leo Figueroa, in order to kind of fill some needs and acquire some big talent on my major league roster as well.
I'm sure Yuki's ears just propped up when he heard Vidal Brujan might be traded, knowing his affinity for Tampa Bay Rays prospects and players as a whole. But yeah, one last question, and then we'll go into our typical wrap-up question here. You obviously finished in the semis, very close to making it to the finals. Where do you expect to finish this year?
That's a little tough. I ranked myself as the third best team in the offseason behind you and EBO, and I believe you had me in the same ranking, Sahil.
Yep.
And I don't think anything has changed substantially there. So I think right now I have the third best team in the league, and I could realistically see myself finishing anywhere between first and fifth.
Okay.
If I finish fifth, it'll be disappointing. If I finish sixth or worst, it'll be disastrous. Right now, I definitely think that I can win the league because I could have won the league this year had it not been for a miracle Sunday by you, Sahil. And I think I'm not at the point where it's championship or bust, but I think a year from now I hope to put myself in the position where I can be a unanimous top 2 team that maybe half of the league picks me as their winner.
Yeah, and just like Sahil said, anybody that makes the top 4, I think too, anybody that is capable of making the semifinals could realistically win it all. So yeah, it could be any one of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I would follow up by asking who do you think is going to have the better finish between you and Erik, but I fear that I would start a 20-minute monologue like the one I accidentally did on the last episode about the Kevin Biggio and trades and Gary Sanchez and Lourdes Gurriel. So I will spare the listeners from that. But Erik, do you want to wrap us up with our last question here?
Sure. So Cam, is there one player on somebody else's roster that you might not have had the chance to reach out on that you might be interested in trying to trade for?
Yeah, there definitely is one player that came to mind. And I mentioned earlier in the show about wanting to, I guess, make my rotation younger. And one guy that sprang to mind was Tristan McKenzie, who was on Connor's team.
Oh.
He's a guy, he came up to the majors. He had that top 50 prospect pedigree, and he came up and was just electric to start. He struck out over 11 batters per 9, and he just has that fastball that's incredible. He's 23 years old, and yet at the same time, I think there are enough aspects about him that are ever so slightly iffy, like the high FIP and the slightly off StatCast numbers, that mean maybe I can get him for a little cheaper than people expect me to. So I think
he was traded once this offseason. I could pull up the deal, but I don't think he went for like that.
He was in the major Andrew Connor deal, I think. Or Alex might have had him before that.
He was traded twice this offseason. So the first trade was Josh Bell and Adbert Alzolay for Tristan McKenzie, 2 seconds, and the reliever Will Smith. And then he was in that big 16-player trade. So looking at the first trade as more of a template for what McKenzie's value is, if that's kind of the level that Connor values him, then yeah, you might be able to get him for a pretty decent price.
Yeah, I agree. I think the one concerning thing is he gave up a lot of home runs this year, but if you look at the home run per fly ball rate, it looks, I guess I should say, anomalous.
Yeah.
And like it's something that I expect to regress. But yeah, at the same time, maybe someone else won't see it as something that could regress and I could pounce.
Yeah, that's hey, anything to help build your rotation and create another monopoly, or Yumi and Ruthvik can continue a monopoly on the starting pitchers. I think he's a great pick, and the Indians really develop pitchers well.
Yeah, exactly. I hadn't even mentioned the fact that he's on the Indians, but that's certainly something that I took into account also when I was picking a guy for this.
Absolutely. I wonder if anyone has actually been able to complete a trade for one of the targets that they mentioned like in their off-season previews. I'm curious.
I don't believe so, but maybe soon.
I closed a trade on the guy that I alluded to, but I never mentioned by name. That was Brandon Woodruff. But yeah, hopefully one of these happens. Maybe Tristan McKenzie will be on your roster by the time this podcast comes out.
Maybe so.
Yeah. Well, any other questions, Erik, or any other thoughts, Cam? All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Cam.
Yeah, I have no other thoughts.
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks for coming on, Cam. It's always a treat to have you on the podcast. I can't believe we finally got you on to interview. Such a rare opportunity for us, but we greatly appreciate it. And thank you again to Erik for coming on to co-host for this segment.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you both for having me. It was a lot of fun.